Hello there. Today I'm going to talk about a few problems that socialism has never really addressed. Socialists don't even address them really. There's a few of them that I would really love to address, right? These problems of economics, right? We call them. The Austrians call them the problem of economics. I don't know what other people call them. I'm a Chicagoan more than an Austrian, but let's just say this is more of an Austrian type video than a Chicagoan type video, like I normally do. Okay, so you have one of the problems with socialism is called the tragedy of the commons. Basically, if everyone owns something, there's no incentive for one person to take care of it because it's public to everyone, and then you chop down the whole forest because you own the trees just as much as everyone else, but there's no common ownership. And so, like, the tragedy of commons is basically a depletion of resources because of common ownership over something. Okay, tragedy of commons. You see that in the stock market today and the market manipulation by the government. You see it a lot. It's a pretty common problem in economics. Socialists never address it. They think, oh, if we have democracy rule, it will always be fixed. Okay, whatever. You think that socialism can still exist? Okay, we're going to talk about another problem. Economic calculation problem. Without the incentive for profits and prices in the economy, it's very hard to calculate stuff. So imagine you're in the Soviet Union, you're a planner. I've probably already mentioned this on my YouTube channel in one of my videos, but the economic calculation problem, you're trying to get around a mountain, right? Or in a mountain, depending on how much resources you have. If you go in the mountain, you need the engineer, but you need less tracks. But if you go around the mountain, you need more tracks, but not the engineer. The problem is, how are you supposed to know what's cheaper, having more steel for the project or having a more advanced engineer for the project? You could use the engineer for some other project, and you can use the steel for some other projects. And so how are you supposed to calculate that without prices? You can't. The only way you can do that is if you look at the United States economy and say, oh, that's how you make that cheaper. So that's the socialism. That's what the Soviet Union did, and a lot of socialist countries did that. They copied the United States, seeing how efficient they were doing, and copied them. The United States, in fact, gave the Soviet Union a lot of tanks so they could win World War II. A lot of socialists don't even bring that up, by the way. They say, oh, yeah, socialism won World War II. No, not necessarily. I think if the United States didn't join the war, it would have been much worse for the Soviet Union. A little bit worse. I would say at least, I would say maybe 50,000 more deaths to probably 500,000. That was pretty bad. World War II was bad, we all admit that. But a lot of people say socialism is what caused the Soviet Union to win World War II. I've heard many Marxists say that. I disagree with that statement, but that's what the Marxists say. Anyway, okay. What's the knowledge problem? How do consumers are knowledgeable on the rainforest in, let's say you're getting a price of coffee, right? You're getting coffee and you like the coffee at a certain price level, but then you make a different decision based on the price of that good, right? And so the scarcity will automatically sort of replenish because of that decision that consumers made. It's called the knowledge problem. And so while the consumer didn't know about the terrible things that are happening in the rainforest where they can't harvest as much coffee, they've automatically made that decision because the prices pretty much went up, and so they made that decision not to buy that coffee anymore, making sure the supply stays in relatively good terms. Socialist economies don't have that because they don't have prices. You've given coffee as a human right, or coffee not at all, because that's a luxury in most socialist economies anyway. So, yeah, you basically, depending on which country you're in, if you're in a socialist country, I mean, you don't have prices, you don't have coffee probably. And so how are you supposed to calculate how much coffee you need? And the knowledge problem sort of solves that. I can't think of any others for right this second. The rule of 120. This is a very important rule. Any trade union over 120 people, same thing with any company over 120 people, it no longer becomes a private company, it becomes a public company. So if any employees, if it goes over 120, basically the human mind can only recognize 120 faces, right? Very, very detailed anyway, 120 faces. And it's very hard for humans to collectivize over 120. And this is a very big issue, is a lot of these trade unions are massive companies. You look at the trade union of California, Teachers Union, California. They're so corrupt, and the reason why they're so corrupt is because they cannot recognize the faces of all the teachers they're supposed to represent. And it creates a hierarchy. If you have a big union, you're just going to create a hierarchy. And so that's what's going to happen. People are advocating for big trade unions and not realizing that they're just going to create a different hierarchy altogether. But yeah, these are some of the most common problems of socialism that I have found. I'm sure that socialists have addressed these economic problems, or whatever you call them, the problems of socialism, or whatever we call them. You can call them whatever you want. I am not a big fan of socialism. Socialism, in my opinion, there's a pyramid. There's the public sector on the top, with the state and corporations and all that, right? And the bottom is the private sector, little family businesses, your own home, your own household, unless your household has over 120 people. Like, it's, the private sector and then the public sector, which is anything over 120 people. And we need to make sure we have as much private business because they're more efficient than public businesses. Public businesses, while they're great at getting capital pretty quickly with, in the stock market, like, I could trade stocks, I could trade Amazon stocks, I could trade, Apple stocks, whatever, right? They're sort of efficient like that. The biggest drawback is, what are you supposed to do with that money once you get it, from the investor? And to be honest with you, they're not getting that capital immediately, because that capital's already been traded through a bunch of investors. It's not being sold directly by the company anymore. So they're barely making any money off of people trading their stock. Not as much anyway. So if they've already diluted the shareholder, they're going to have a hard time diluting the shareholder again. Also, the capital markets problem in socialism. That's a very big problem. Socialists have never described to me what their capital markets are going to look like. In my opinion, we should do what Sweden does. Okay, now you might disagree with this. Sweden has a very low tax rate on corporations and small businesses. They do. They have a very high tax rate on employees. But there's a good reason for that. Employees like their benefits. They like their discount health care. They like their house subsidizing. They love their child care, right? I do think that they're a little tyrannical with their child care in Sweden. Okay, I've read about it. It doesn't seem very nice. But besides the point, right, that you have to have your kid go to child care. That seems to be a big deal. You get parental leave and you have forced to have your kid in child care. Whatever. It seems like a nightmare's place. But Sweden's okay. They advocate for that. While they advocate for that, they give these people benefits. Now, I don't like the idea of a big state. I think they've had centuries to reform all that stuff, and it's going to take forever in the United States to do all that. And we're going to have to do it statewide, not countrywide. I hate the fact that we keep trying to do federal things when we can do United States, statewide things instead of nationwide things. So that's the point of our country, is if we're going to have a welfare system, have it so the state fails first before we enact it on the whole federal government. But the problem is we're not learning, and we're enacting it on the federal government now. And it's ridiculous. You see Joe Biden now, rent control, price control problem. That's another problem that socialism has. There's so much problems with socialism, right? That they violate the voluntary transactions of people. It's ridiculous. And so we need to find a way where we're not violating the voluntary transaction of people, and to make the market as efficient as possible while people can afford things, which I don't know how you're going to do that, but socialism's not the answer. I just don't think it is. There's too many economic problems, and my brothers haven't even they don't even know any of these problems probably. Maybe they have, but they haven't fully expressed how to solve the tragedy of the commons, the economic calculation problem, the knowledge problem, the rule of 120. They have not explained any of this to me. My brothers, I don't know why. They just refuse to even talk about this stuff and the problems of socialism. Or they just don't know about it. Either case, that makes them ignorant. Because we need this taught in schools. We need this to really focus on. Why did the Soviet Union fail? Why is there 15 republics now that are not part of the Soviet Union? That is a big question in our world. Our modern world is built off the collapse of the Soviet Union, in my opinion. We're not spending as much, nearly percentage-wise, as GDP like we used to. Because the Soviet Union no longer exists. Anyway, you're someone, I'm someone else. I'm the Daryl maniac, not someone else. But you get the point. Goodbye.